information. And then finally, there are those, even on Capitol Hill, who have told me, well, when you're talking about delaying sex, there are certain communities where marriage isn't very much a majority view there, and so we should not be talking about abstinence until marriage. And so we asked Hispanic, African American, Caucasian parents, do you agree? And you'll notice that especially African American parents said, no, this is an expectation that we hold, and we hold it very highly. So this was a myth buster. It also shows that the SRA approach resonates with most parents. What about teens? Well, you'll notice that in 1991, 46% of high schoolers had ever had sex, or had never had sex. The minority. In 2013, the most recent data we have, it's now just about 54%. And as Dr. Foley said earlier, it's not what we want, but to see that increase, isn't that astounding? So over the past 20 years, there's been almost a 12% increase in high school students choosing sexual risk avoidance. Also, they're waiting longer. The percentage of students who have sex before 13, decreasing. Let's look at that specific age group that is most often targeted for sex education, the 15 to 17-year-olds. Look here at this data. The graph on the left are 15 to 17-year-olds who have never had sex. 72% of boys, 73% of girls never had sex. Do you think most people know that data? No. Then some might say, oh, well, maybe they haven't had sex, but what other kind of sexual activity have they engaged in, right? Well, that's what the second table reflects. 60% of girls, almost 53% of boys have had no sexual contact whatsoever. Now, sure, those numbers decreased a bit, but it's still the majority. So the question has to be asked, why then wouldn't we want to reinforce those healthy behaviors with a sexual risk avoidance message and encourage those numbers to increase via the information and skills for SRA? Okay, we're going to move quickly because I have a feeling I'm probably spending too much time with each of these. Let's just look at that breakdown, though, of the abstinent behavior among 15 to 17-year-olds. Here's another thing that might be surprising to you. There has been that 11% increase in behavior, positive behavior, but among boys it has increased even more. Isn't that encouraging and astounding? Well, the research shows that it's resonating. It is based in theoretical fact, which points to that we need to listen. This is something of relevance. SRA is meaningful in today's culture. And yet, where I hang out, federal sex ed policy does not reflect that. In 2008, under President Bush, 25% of all federal sex ed funding went to sexual risk avoidance education. His goal was to bring it to 50-50. And he actually increased it by 100% during his term, but still, it was only 25%. President Obama's goal has been to totally eliminate it, and he was successful in doing that for about 6 months, but now 6% of federal sex ed policy is devoted to sexual risk avoidance education. So we are going to go past some of these since I have 2 minutes. We know that youth bear the disproportionate percentage of STDs. 25% of the sexually active population, 50% of all STIs. So we really need to look at how the SRA approach is so vital to decreasing STDs and STIs. Zero risk with zero partners, but just increasing from one partner to 2 or more partners increases the risk of STIs 128%. And yet we're starting to see an uptick of 4 or more partners. Condom use is decreasing even though federal sex ed priorities are putting an increased priority on it. Those who argue that we need to make sure that we encourage condom use should be all about SRA education, because condom use increases as age of sexual delay increases. Not just as they get older. If it's not tied to sexual delay, condom use decreases. It has to be tied to sexual delay. Birth control, same kind of thing. And yet, when you look at teen births today, 90% of them, nearly, are to single parents that increase their risk of poverty. To learn more about that, I encourage you to go to Janine's breakout, because she's going to talk about that, and I am not going to even touch on it, other than to say, young people who wait to have sex until marriage and have children within marriage only have a 2% chance of living their adult lives in poverty, which is very astounding. This is not a just say no message. It's relevant and resonant today more than ever. And those of us who are concerned about young people, and not just their decisions in middle school and high school, but for life, can confidently support the SRA message. Thanks.